The best part about this car is the price. The 9th generation Honda Accord is just like any other nice sedan, but this is the generation that Honda traded their well-known reliability for some risky new tech. Things such as CVT transmissions and direct injection only engines. This car can either be a long-term bargain or a ticking time bomb depending on how it was taken care of. Most buyers were taught to stick with Hondas and Toyotas because that's what we're taught. Those are the reliable cars. But they may have no idea what they're walking into if they're not prepared. By the end of this video, you'll know if this Honda deserves another lap or if it's Honda's biggest trap. This is a 2014 model year Honda Accord with the 2.4 liter K24W1 motor and the LL-CVT transmission. This engine puts out 184 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 181 foot-pounds of torque at 3,900 RPM. The Honda Accord Sport version of this car had a different intake and a dual exhaust, and the ECU was tuned to accommodate the dual exhaust, and it squeezed out an additional 5 horsepower, giving it 189 horsepower. These cars are big, spacious, and exactly what you would want for a car that's economical, spacious, and has enough power to get you around town. You see, the cars from the 90s have been becoming very popular in the past couple of years thanks to the prices of new cars. The absurd prices. However, you don't really need to go all the way back to the 90s to get something that's actually reliable. Of course, this is a 2014 model year, and this will give you everything you're looking for without breaking the bank, and especially considering the price that these are going for. These are finally under $10,000, but the caveat is you're gonna have to get one with more mileage, and you need to know exactly what goes wrong with these because this is over 10 years old at this point. The interior is one of the things that I really like about this Honda Accord. The material all over the interior is nice. The dashboard is padded. There's plenty of room. If you extend the seat all the way back, which I have now, lots of room, and it's super comfortable. This doesn't have all of the features, but it still feels like a premium mid-size car above even the American selections, especially with some of the features that it has, like the camera on the passenger side that records your blind spot. I really like that the Honda did that because it helps with visibility. Most manufacturers should have done that, to be honest with you, but they got the blind spot monitor now for new cars. I do love the fact that they have physical buttons. A lot of manufacturers lately have moved away from physical buttons. Much better to have physical buttons. You can actually drive without having to look down at a screen and swiping your finger. I don't know why anybody came up with that for new cars, but please, manufacturers, if you ever see this video, please stop doing that. All of the buttons on the steering wheel are perfectly placed, in my opinion. It has a physical parking brake. There's a nice storage for your sunglasses. You have a nice cubby hole for phones or other accessories. And the sunroof does open. You have your one touch and you have your tilt for your sunroof, which is awesome. I love that. You have 2 power outlets. You have a 12-volt power outlet underneath the cubby, and you have one in the center console. You have 2 cup holders here, and you have 2 cup holders in the back seat, which is really nice. There's another cubby holder down to the left of the USB port, which is also very convenient. You have one USB 2.0 plug and an option for something else, which is probably an auxiliary, which this one didn't come with. It's a nice interior. It's really comfortable. I really like this interior. I don't know if the camera will actually catch this, but this is a very long door. It feels like it does give you more room to enter the back seat, which is nice. The black section of the trim is hard plastic, whereas the rest of the trim is still soft to the touch, which is really nice. A lot of manufacturers don't give much attention to the back seat. Usually all of the panel is hard plastic, and appreciate that from Honda. There is the center armrest with the dual cup holder, which I wish more manufacturers did that. And then you have some vents down here for your AC and your heater. The back seats fold down, which is even better. And you have a little light back here. Pretty nice. The 2014 Honda Accord 9th generation has the K24W1 for the 4-cylinder version. This engine has 185 horsepower at 6,400 RPM and 181 pound-feet of torque at 3,900 RPM. The sport trim bumps this up to 189 horsepower thanks to the dual exhaust and intake, and the tune, which is designed to accommodate the different intake and exhaust. These 2.4s were also paired with a 6-speed manual transmission, so that's an option out there. They're not as common, however, so I give kudos to Honda for offering the manual transmission. Unfortunately, it's just harder to find one. If you like to drive manual transmission like I do personally, then you can find one with one of these. The K24W1 was one of the first Honda motors to feature direct injection under the Earth Dreams program. This boosted torque at lower RPMs compared to the older port-injected K-series motors. Compression went up to 11.11, improving efficiency and giving it a little bit more punch without needing premium fuel. This engine was also paired with Honda's new CVT instead of the old 5-speed automatic transmission. That left a lot of concern that we'll talk about in a little bit, but I'll just be upfront with you. There isn't too much to be concerned about with this transmission. There is some things that you need to know to make them last compared to a traditional automatic transmission, but this is pretty reliable actually. It's not like the Nissan transmissions that everybody likes to make fun of. This is not that. The K24W1 Earth Dreams 2.4 motor has no turbocharger to worry about, which means there's no expensive snail under the hood waiting to give out at 120,000 miles, costing you thousands of dollars to replace. There's no timing belt that needs to be replaced every 100,000 miles or so, like the J35Y1 V6 motor that's available in this same 9th generation Honda Accord. This has a timing chain, which doesn't need servicing, though there's the occasional problem with the tensioner that I will share with you, but it's not really the biggest problem in the world, and it's not the hardest to replace. We're going to get to that in just a moment, so stick around. There are no common head gasket failures, so unlike the 1.5 turbocharged motors from the 10th generation Honda Accord or some of the Subaru EJ25s, you won't be budgeting coolant in your monthly grocery list. There's no annoying auto start-stop system like the newer Accords as well, where the engine shuts off at every single red light just to remind you that you hate technology. There's no fragile coolant neck problems like the GM 1.4 liter Ecotec, where plastic parts age about as well as a gallon of milk left outside of the refrigerator. And no major transmission disasters. This is not a Nissan CVT. This engine is simple, straightforward, and exactly why this engine has a reputation for lasting a very long time. But for all of the positive remarks that I have giveth, I shall take it some away, starting with the starter failure. This isn't too unusual for Honda. A big problem with a lot of Hondas was if you use an aftermarket starter, it would interfere with the crank sensor and the signal and actually cause drivability issues. Weird. They didn't all do that. I think manufacturers figured that out. You got to remember that. These valve covers tend to leak. You will see a lot of oil in this area over here. That's a very easy fix. But if you see it, fix it. The LED strip in the headlight can fail. That's one of the things that can happen with these cars. It is easily resolvable, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. The intake tube, a lot of other manufacturers have this problem with the intake tube that tears, and believe me, if you have inspections in your state, they will notice it before you do, so make sure to check that out. There was a recall on the battery sensor. There were some problems with fires, so make sure to check that recall out. If you have any problems with the electrical system, like a bad alternator, it's very similar to my Lexus, where the electrical system and the ECUs don't know what to do. The voltage drops and it doesn't know how to actually identify parts that are bad or good, and it will throw you a code for a whole bunch of stuff. You'll get a whole bunch of lights on your dashboard and a whole bunch of codes. Check your alternator. Luckily, it's very easy to replace. It's right up front. I talk about this all the time. The biggest problem with new cars is not the fact that they have a lot of parts that can fail, like a turbocharger, for example, that this one does not have. The problem is the cost to fix it. If a lot of this stuff is buried far down into the engine bay and it's going to cost you thousands in just labor, not including the part to get to it, you have a big problem on your hands. It doesn't matter what the problem is on any car. If you can get it replaced very easily, that's a huge pro. This alternator is right up front. This is very easy to change. I wish all manufacturers did stuff like this, but they don't. The two big problems on this motor that you're going to want to look out for are, one is going to be oil burning problems. This was a known problem with Honda. These had a problem with the oil control rings getting carbon built up and stuck in them, and it would not keep oil out of the combustion chamber, and you would get a whole bunch of oil burning problems. In some cases, the entire engine had to be replaced. There are a lot of Honda Accord owners that do have problems with oil consumption, and you can keep going for a while, but you're gonna have to address it. One way to avoid it is very obvious, and that is to just change your oil on time. I keep saying this, everybody tells you this. It's very obvious, but change your oil on time, because that will cause a problem The main problem lies with the oil control rings on the pistons. Over time, carbon and varnish builds up around the oil control ring and the tiny drainback holes. When those holes or the ring itself gets clogged, the rings can't scrape oil off of the cylinder walls effectively. Oil then lingers on the cylinder walls and gets burned in the regular combustion process. This will typically show up as gradual oil consumption. In worst case scenarios, it can be a quart every 1,000 miles or so, which is pretty bad. This seems to heavily affect engines with short trips or poor maintenance, which poor maintenance is probably the #1 cause of this. Again, newer engines like this one, or more modern engines, seem to be much less tolerant of long oil change intervals. On every video, I recommend even more so to change your oil on time. In fact, change it before the car says to change it. I would say every 5,000 miles. That computer doesn't tell you to change it every 5,000 usually. It actually has you go a little bit longer than that, which I don't recommend doing. 5,000 is a good number. If you want to do it before that, you can. I don't think it's fully necessary, but for engines that have had known problems like this, it doesn't hurt to do it maybe every 4,000 miles. And I know a lot of people are going to frown at that, but you want this engine to last, right? It's very simple. Change your oil every 5,000 miles. That's it. Other owners have also reported replacing the PCV valve, and that has helped their issue dramatically. So if you're having this problem, I would look to see if your PCV valve is clogged. That can actually help fix this issue. The PCV valve will relieve pressure from the crankcase, and they do tend to get clogged up from time to time, so make sure to check that. Though this is a known problem for these K24W1 motors, it's not the end of the world. All of them aren't affected, but it seems to be more than average. If you look up oil consumption for any used engine, including some of the best built engines out there, oil consumption exists. It's just a thing with older engines, but some have more problems than others, and this one seems to be the case. This seems to be a big culprit of lack of oil changes, and remember, that's kind of normal for any average car. People don't change their oil every 5,000 miles. They wait till the dashboard tells them to change it, and that's usually too long. The other big problem that this engine can have that is also related to not changing your oil on time is the timing chain tensioner. Inside the tensioner body is a piston with a spring in it. When the engine's off or oil pressure is lower, the spring will push forward to maintain baseline tension. The oil pressure will push the piston out, preventing chain slap and allowing the chain to stay tight, especially at higher RPMs. Once the piston is extended, it can't retract once the oil pressure drops. The problem is that this mechanism can get gunked up with oil. The tensioner doesn't put tension on the timing chain, and it allows the timing chain to rattle or slap against the engine. You will notice this especially on a cold startup as a rattling or a grinding noise. If you hear that, you want to address it. Or if you hear that with the car that you're buying, you might want to skip it. That goes back to changing your oil on time. The LLCVT also had a problem with the valve body in the 2013 and 2014 model years. Honda issued a technical service bulletin to fix this. A lot of cars got repaired under warranty. The symptoms for this were some jerking or feeling like it's slipping, especially when it's accelerating from a stop. There was an updated valve body and a software update to accommodate the new valve body issued in about 2014 to 2015. The 2015 model years and newer already had the updated valve body and the software, so you don't have to worry about that for the later model years. You know, I know people are scared of CVTs, and rightfully so. They seem to fail more often than your traditional automatic transmission, and of course a manual transmission. But the thing about the Honda CVTs is that they are reliable. They just don't tolerate as much neglect as a traditional automatic would, meaning that you can't get away from changing your transmission fluid on these as much as you can with the traditional automatic transmission. However, a lot of people with the traditional automatic still don't change their fluid, and those transmissions still fail because of that. But these will fail faster if you don't. Also, they don't tolerate too much abuse. I wouldn't be accelerating hard from a stop consistently. Here and there, sure, but on a normal basis, I wouldn't do that because you're gonna be stressing these things. The engine mounts are a common failure on Hondas, and this has been a thing for years. In the business that I have been running for over 10 years, I've probably sold over 50,000 engine mounts in the 10 plus years I've been doing business, and Hondas take the cake. There are different type of quality engine mounts that you can get. There's your general aftermarket, there are fluid filled that work. Some people may not like the aftermarket ones, but they work for the Hondas. Then there are the really cheap ones that you find that are a big hit or miss. They can work, I'm not saying that they can't, because I know people have used them, but sometimes they're fake. And I actually had somebody return one that wasn't mine, and I saw exactly what people were paying for the $20 mounts. And of course, then there's OEM. You can't beat OEM. If you've ever had a conversation with me, either online or on the phone, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm not gonna lie to you. Aftermarket does serve its purpose, which is why I've sold aftermarket for so long. and I use aftermarket for so long. But if you're very picky about your car and little vibrations matter, you want to look at OEM. I'm going to start off with one of the problems that you'll deal with, and that is the infotainment system freezing or turning black. If you have that problem, you can just reset it by pressing the power button and holding it for 10 plus seconds and seeing if that does it. Otherwise, if you can't get it like that, you can disconnect the battery for an extended period of time, I would say several minutes, and see if that fixes it. If that still doesn't fix it, you may have to replace it. It could be the ribbon cable on the back for the digitizer, but you can find these used for reasonable prices, which is another reason why I like used cars. The rotors on this car are actually a little bit thin, so if you have a problem with the steering wheel shaking when you press the brake pedal, you're going to want to replace your rotors or resurface them. Most of the time, it's just cheaper to replace the rotors. Also, there was a recall for the CV axle, so you're going to want to look into that. Test driving the 2014 Honda Accord 2.4 liter with the CVT. You know, this transmission does not feel like a rubber band like Nissan's. Even as a passenger, I can feel the rubber band effect. This one doesn't feel like that. In fact, this one actually has kind of like its own simulated shift, which honestly I kind of like. This car feels standard, but in a premium way. It's got a little bit of a sporty feel. It's not super cushiony or too firm, but it feels right. It's a big interior that feels small, I guess, in a way. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's comfortable though. And you know it's big. I like this right here, by the way. I like this screen. More cars should have this screen. I like the fact that it gets really good fuel economy, especially for the size car. Now, that's a big thing with new cars that you don't really get with old cars. You kind of get it with old cars, but you get safety, and you get the space, and you get the fuel economy. It's hard to get that with older cars, unfortunately. The CVT and the Hondas have a great feel. And you know, they had some problems with the valve bodies for the early years, 2013 and 2014. And some of the software needed to be reprogrammed when they updated the valve bodies. A lot of them have been repaired by that point. Otherwise, there isn't much going on. These don't have the same type of tolerance for lack of maintenance, however. You can't just set it and forget it. You do have to change the CVT fluid. They don't tolerate the type of abuse that a standard 6-speed or 5-speed or 4-speed or whatever type of automatic will tolerate. They just don't. If you're looking for the transmission fluid, I have it in the description. I get a cut from that, so hey, if you want to get some transmission fluid, check out the description. I appreciate you supporting the channel. The best part about this car is the price. What can you do to get around the $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 cars that are out there, and it's getting something like this? And so that makes the 2014 Honda Accord 2.4 liter with the K24W1. I'm going to do things differently on the Dobbs list. I'm going to put all the scores here. I'm going to tell you exactly why I gave it the score. The engine's going to get a 7. And I know if you've had oil consumption problems, you're not going to like the 7. You feel like it deserves a much lower score, but these engines are actually reliable. Yes, it was a known problem. And yes, some engines were affected by this, but all of them were not affected. A lot of these engines do last a very long time. Plus, the way you maintain the vehicle does matter. And I know there are people that have maintained it and still run into these problems. But you have to be very, very, very picky about maintaining these. These are not like the old Honda engines where you can skip oil changes and continue going. Those can tolerate that. These don't. Maybe you bought the car used and you didn't know how the previous owner took care of it. I do see that most owners have had a positive experience, but it's a thing that you have to know. So that knocked the score down. Otherwise, there's no serious problems like head gasket problems or timing chain stretch. There's the tensioner, but it's also easy to replace. It gives you warning. You'll hear that chain slap noise on startup, on a cold startup especially. And the chain tensioner is very accessible actually. Super kudos to Honda on that one. It's going to get a 7. The transmission is going to get a 6.5, and that's because it's a CVT. Yes, the CVTs require a lot more maintenance, and it was a well-designed transmission, but there were problems with the valve bodies and some earlier TSBs that had to be addressed. That were addressed by 2015. They had to update the valve body and the software to accommodate the valve body. It is a reliable transmission, but they don't take a lot of abuse like our standard automatic transmission would, and they require very meticulous maintenance to keep running. It's unfortunate. It's just the way CVTs are, no matter what, no matter who makes them. It's just the nature of the operation of CVT. So they're never going to get a perfect score on this one because it just doesn't work with the way people are. People delay maintenance normally, but it is a good transmission. There's no widespread problems. I'm going to give it a 6.5. The suspension is a 9. I see,
see typical things like control arm bushings and stuff like that. Honestly, that's just regular maintenance. Most cars have control arm bushings that wear out, usually under 100,000, 75 to 100. But anything majorly expensive or that can prevent the car from driving, no. There was the recall for the CV axles for rust belt, but honestly, these aren't stuff that's too far out of the ordinary. I'm gonna give the suspension a 9. The repair cost, or is it DIY-able? Well, the cost of a replacement engine for this car runs about $800, maybe more, at least for the Northern California region. That's not bad at all. That's actually pretty good. And of course, if you have to pay labor, it's gonna tack on a lot more than that, but that's not a bad price. That's actually an indicator that these are not unreliable engines, because if they were, that price would be much higher because of higher demand. Some of these engines have been replaced because of oil consumption, but it's not too bad. The transmissions are kind of along the lines with all the CVTs. They run around $1,500 to $2,000 or sometimes even more for a used unit. Now, they don't have major common problems besides the 2013 and 2014 model years that have been corrected, but just keep that in mind. If you get a used unit, then most likely it's going to be fine. Unlike other vehicles, like if you have a 2008 Nissan Altima 2.5 with the CVT, you get a used transmission, no bueno. That's going to be a problem because all of them had the same problem. It is kind of pricey, so it's going to take a hit. That's why I give it a 6.5. Everything else is very accessible. Timing chain tensioner is very easy to replace. Well, I wouldn't say easy, but it's accessible. They really thought about being able to access that timing chain tensioner, and big kudos. And everything else is easy. There's no turbocharger. Everything is within an accessible range. The starter is underneath. You have to access the starter from underneath, which I know can be a pain, but it is doable if you're a mechanic. This isn't the worst thing in the world. For a standard DIY, they might be frustrated, so it does play into the 6.5 score as well, but it's not the worst thing in the world. 6.5. Interior wear and tear. I didn't see anything that was way out of the ordinary besides the power window buttons. This interior seems to be very, very robust, and it seems to last a long time, and it looks good for a long time, so that's a huge plus. You don't have to drive around with melting dashboards or dashboards that are cracking and falling apart. I love this. I love that they did a good job. Honda has always seemed to get this right, so it's going to get a 9. Body and exterior is 6.5. Traditional paint wear, very typical. It seems to be with Honda. I don't know why. I haven't figured this out. I see this with a lot of owners, and I see a lot of people and a lot of Hondas with faded paint, so just a heads up. They do seem to fade a little bit sooner. Just my observation, so I'm going to give it a 6.5. By the way, those engine mounts that I was talking about earlier, I have them with me right here. This is the one that somebody returned to me, and this is the one that I sold. They got the full refund for the expensive one, and then they gave me the cheap one back. And I kept it because I was curious. I'd never seen this before. These are both aftermarket engine mounts. This is hydraulic. This is not. Though OEM is still the best you can get, there is a difference in what you pay. So just a heads up. I'm not knocking people that gotta save money and get the $20, $25 engine mounts. Sometimes $30 you'll probably see these for. But just know what you're getting before you purchase them. Just at least having the knowledge beforehand, and it helps to know what you're paying for here. Or this doesn't do anything. You might as well have just left it blank, but they made it like this just so it looks like what it's supposed to be. Much lighter. This is going to make more noise, but it's going to work. Lighter engine mounts, you'll get more of the rumble sound and stuff, but just a heads up. This is for an older Honda. This is for a 2004 to 2008. It's not for the 13, 14, 15, but I wouldn't be surprised to see products like this that are out on the market. So, hey, I'm not knocking people that gotta save money. If you gotta save money, I get it, but at least you should know what you're getting. Hey, thanks for checking this video out. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and like the video and comment as well. I'd like to hear your story about ownership of this car. There are a lot more videos coming up, so make sure to subscribe to the channel. And hey, if you're in the Sacramento area and you want to have a car that you want on the channel, make sure to reach out. I'm going to leave my email in the description. I'd love to review your car. Hey, thanks for checking this video out, and I'll see you in the next one.